Welcome back to the channel, everyone. Today I want to talk about Citadel Investors potentially losing everything, just like what recently happened to investors of Anson Funds. So stay tuned and let's make some money. And now I want to dive straight in with the key information. So, Dr. Marco Metzler just posted on LinkedIn saying Citadel Investors are on the verge of losing all of their investments. He said the US Department of Justice has recently targeted Anson Funds in a criminal investigation focused on market manipulation, insider trading, spoofing, and fraud. He believes that's something that is also very likely to happen to Citadel, if not already being done in secret. He says worst of all for Anson Funds, Citron Research, a firm that has also released short reports on AMC, said in a statement that it's cooperating fully with the government's investigation. According to Bloomberg's description of the Justice Department investigation, money managers are suspected of attempting to induce stunning stock declines and insider trading. And now it's apparently been confirmed that a number of short sellers, affected companies, and several individuals have come forward and begun cooperating with the Justice Department in the investigation. This is terrible news for Anson Funds investors. It ultimately means that any funds Anson may have earned through illegal activities could be seized. And actually, a little bit later on in the video, we have the figures of just how much fines they could be facing. He says this could put all investors in the Anson Funds at risk of losing profits from illegal trades and potentially the underlying capital as well. Even worse for investors, those who remain in the fund could face additional Justice Department investigations, and the Justice Department not only seizes profits, but also imposes punitive damages for fraud, which, as noted above, can be 5 times the profits. So if Anson illegally made $300 million in profits over the last 3 years, the company could face up to $1.5 billion in fines and the seizure of the $300 million in profits. And obviously that's a very tough situation for a fund that only has $1.4 billion to work with, including all of that investor capital. And it could be much more devastating for Citadel, which has just under $38 billion in investor capital and over $230 billion of actual assets under management. Dr. Marco Metzler says shareholders now have little time to act before the damage is irrevocable. If they request redemptions now, they may be able to get their funds back before the Justice Department brings charges against Anson and seizes everything under US law. It will probably only be a matter of time before one of the most criminally involved hedge funds in the US is also under investigation by the Department of Justice, if it isn't already. MooMoo are currently giving away an iPhone 13 Pro and many other goodies every single day this month until Christmas. On top of that, when you sign up to MooMoo, using the link in the description below, you get 5 free stocks valued up to $17,500. That's 5 free stocks valued up to $3,500 each. You get the first free stock just for signing up with MooMoo and opening your account. You get the second free stock for making your first deposit, even if it's only $1. And you can get the final 3 remaining free stocks for depositing $2,000. And also be sure to deposit at least $100 and check back on MooMoo every single day to see if you've won that iPhone or the other goodies. Now, there was actually some original due diligence on Anson Funds that was performed over 9 months ago. The poster said while this doesn't go into huge depth about naked shorting, it does give us insight towards the other dealings that Anson Funds does to attack small companies actually making a difference. Anson Funds is a Canadian asset management company and hedge fund that specialises in short selling. At first glance, they seem to be like any other hedge fund operating in the markets, like Citadel for example, but although upon closer inspection lies a tale of greed, corruption and criminal activity. The preferred operating method is to wave a wad of cash in the faces of small-scale businesses only to severely short the company post-IPO. They use insider information to launch smear campaigns and spread misinformation on various social media platforms and financial boards, just like what's been happening to AMC over the last year. Anson Funds were notorious for fabricating rumours and bad PR on the following companies, many of which no longer exist. There's Zenobis, Tilray, Alfrea, FaceDrive, Genius Brands, and the Green Organic Dutchman. Now I'll leave the link to this post down in the description below so you can give a read to some of the companies that were shorted by Anson Funds. And as a conclusion, it says, despite the overwhelming amount of evidence, Anson Funds continues to operate alongside a corrupt posse of hedge funds and news reporters. It says they represent everything that is broken about the markets and remain a glaring example of the shortcomings of regulatory bodies. Bear in mind, this article was written 9 months ago, before anyone even knew that Anson Funds was being investigated for their malpractice. And it's very, very possible that in 9 months' time, the Department of Justice could be releasing a very, very similar report on Citadel. Speaking of which, I also wanted to talk about SEC Commissioner Elad Elroizman announcing his intent to depart the SEC. Now recently there have been a number of SEC employees leaving, and therefore Elad could just be one of many SEC employees trying to get out before it all comes crashing down and before they end up taking the blame for it. On top of this, I also wanted to touch on Adam Aron's recent tweet celebrating the success of the new SpiderMan release. He said the self-absorbed, all-knowing, so often wrong conventional wisdom that streaming will defeat theatres just does not know how to process the news of the $253 million domestic opening of SpiderMan, the third biggest opening of all time. Hey Prophets of Doom, hashtag choke on that. He also gave an update on that as Sony Pictures just released an updated figure, and SpiderMan is now the second biggest movie opening of all time, even including pre-pandemic times. Now that to me sounds very bullish indeed. If you want to pick up a t-shirt just like this, be sure to check out my store down in the description below. Now on top of this, AMC just triggered a short squeeze signal on Ortex, which obviously is bullish as hell. The last time AMC actually triggered an Ortex short squeeze signal was a long time ago, probably back in June and July time. I think it may have also generated a short squeeze signal back in the run up towards that $53, $56 area that we saw back in September, but nothing since then. And therefore this is obviously very, very bullish, as AMC seems to be moving against the wider market and has been having some very, very good days recently. Over the last 5 days, AMC is up 41.9%, which obviously is brilliant, but personally I'd love to see AMC have some 40% days or some 100% days over the next few weeks. Now on top of this, I also wanted to touch on the wider market. You may already know that Nancy Pelosi opposed the idea of members of Congress not being allowed to invest in or trade stocks, obviously because she's the queen of insider trading. But AOC has pushed back on Nancy Pelosi's stance against banning congressional stock trading. AOC said we write major policy and have access to sensitive information, and therefore obviously members of Congress should not be allowed to invest in and trade stocks. Business Insider recently found that 52 members of Congress and 182 senior staffers have violated the Stock Act. I personally think it is crucial for the fairness of the market that people that have access to insider information, like members of Congress, shouldn't be allowed to trade in and invest in stocks. Because obviously if they do have access to all of that information, they can make trades ahead of the market and profit massively. You may say, well Tom, does it really make much of a difference if 1 or 2 people invest ahead of the market? But you have to remember that because they've been doing it for such a long time, they've built up massive, massive fortunes, hundreds of millions of dollars in size. And when people have massive fortunes like that, it can move the entire market and it can crash stocks. Therefore, many regular everyday Americans could find themselves losing a ton of money through no real fault of their own. And finally, I also wanted to quickly touch on the reverse repo figures for today, where we set a new record once again of $1.75 trillion in that overnight repo facility. Over the last week, that overnight repo facility has increased by nearly $250 billion, going from 1.5 trillion all the way to 1.75 trillion. This is an absolutely ridiculous increase over the span of a week or 10 days at a push. Based on this trajectory, it won't be long, maybe another 5 days to 10 days before we hit $2 trillion in that overnight repo facility. Guys, be sure to let me know down in the comments below what you think about Citadel Investors potentially losing everything. And as always guys, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to check out some of my others. Alternatively, subscribe to the channel and ding that notification bell, because that way you'll be alerted when I upload a new video. Cheers.